Welcome to a Legendarium special about the history behind Bram Stoker's Dracula. Bram Stoker's iconic vampire, a Transylvanian count who turns into a bat, sleeps in a coffin, and drinks the blood of the living, is the quintessential horror villain. Yet where did he come from? Bram Stoker was born in Dublin during the year 1847 to Abraham and Charlotte Stoker. Bram Stoker proved a sickly child, and until the age of 7, he spent most of his time in bed, where his mother told him strange stories of Irish folklore. She also told him of the horror she witnessed during the 1832 cholera epidemic. During that grim time, Dubliners threw the dead into mass graves, sometimes accidentally flinging in the still living by mistake, where they would slowly die among the dead. As a teenager, Stoker had a neighbor named Dante Gabriele Rossetti, the nephew of John Polidori, a man who wrote one of the first vampire novels of the Victorian era. And with them, young Bram Stoker witnessed something that may well have inspired his iconic novel. When Rossetti's wife Elizabeth Siddall died in 1862, Rossetti put a journal of love poems into her coffin and wound it in her red hair. 7 years later, Rossetti suddenly changed his mind and exhumed the coffin during the middle of the night so he could retrieve the book for publication. Some of Siddall's red hair came away in Rossetti's hands. It is almost certain that Stoker knew about this incident, and perhaps it lodged in his imagination. As a young man, Stoker studied mathematics at Trinity College, founded by Elizabeth I 3 centuries earlier. At first, he worked as a civil servant in Dublin Castle, home to British royals while in Ireland. During the evening, Stoker also worked as an unpaid writer for the Dublin Evening Mail, writing reviews of local theatre. He even found time to write stories, the first being the 1872 short story, The Crystal Cup. After 10 years of working quietly in civil service, Henry Irving, after reviewing Irving's performance as Hamlet. Stoker became Irving's business manager, press agent, and secretary. His job started early and ended late, with a lot of ego boosting for Irving in between. Some have suggested that the tall, flamboyant, aristocratic, and often mesmerizing Irving became the basis for Dracula. One witness described Irving as a man who could drain the life out of those around him and yet exert a fascination that made the soul-destroying experience pleasurable. It certainly drew Stoker's energy. He wrote letters, sometimes up to 50 per day, for Irving and traveled worldwide on Irving's tours. During this time, Stoker married an aspiring actress named Florence Balcombe, who gave birth to their son, Irving Noel Thornley, in late 1879. By that time, vampire fiction had become a mainstay of Victorian literature. It began with a series of reports by the personal physician of Austrian Empress Maria Theresa. Horrified by stories of Slavic peasants exhuming and mutilating corpses to stop supposed vampire attacks, she sent her man to investigate. His reports about the persistent belief in vampires, which dated back to before Christianity, captured the British imagination. Vampires seeped into literature with John Polidori's imaginatively titled book, The Vampire. Polidori originally joined the famous ghost story contest that included Lord Byron and Mary Shelley, which ultimately produced the 1816 novel Frankenstein. While The Vampire is not well known today, it started a well-known trend. This trend included the Varney the Vampire series published in the Penny Dreadfuls of the 1840s, and Carmilla, a novel about a lesbian vampire written during the 1870s. Stoker likely had his own vampiric vision from a nightmare caused by eating some spoiled crab for supper. During this nightmare, Stoker envisioned a vampire king rising from his tomb, and in March 1890, Stoker expanded on his vision by writing in his journal about a young man kissing girls not on the lips but on the throat. He then wrote of the vampire king interfering, filled with a terrible and diabolical rage. Stoker actually began Dracula in summer 1890, 2 years after Jack the Ripper terrorized London, a series of murders that almost certainly influenced Stoker. Originally, Stoker named his vampire Count Wampir, but happened across the name Dracula in his studies of Romania. Most famously, Vlad III of Romania had that name, and he of course became infamous for skewering the Turks alive on wooden pikes. It is uncertain how much Stoker knew about Vlad III. We only know that he read a book about the princes of Wallachia and Moldavia and wrote in a footnote, "Dracula in the Wallachian language means devil." It seems that Stoker became so taken with the name Dracula that not only did he change the name of Count Wampir to Dracula, but he changed the title of the book from The Undead to Dracula just days before publication. Although Stoker set his book in Transylvania, he never actually visited the country. Instead, he researched Transylvania as best he could and imagined the rest. Most of his Victorian readers didn't know the difference, especially since Stoker added details from travel books, like train timetables, hotel names, and a chicken dish called paprika hendel. For the inspiration of Castle Dracula, Stoker used Slane's Castle in Scotland, where he spent his summers as a boy. He later described it as a vast ruined castle, from whose tall black windows came no ray of light, and whose broken battlements showed a jagged line against the sky. Upon release, Dracula enjoyed good to reviews, but suffered from poor sales. By the end of his life, Stoker grew so poor that he had to ask for help from the Royal Literary Fund. When he died in 1912, obituaries wrote much about his working relationship with Henry Irving, but barely noted Dracula, if they did at all. Yet a twist of fate brought Dracula back from the tomb of obscurity. 10 years after Stoker's death, a German film studio made a movie based on his novel. Despite some name changes, the similarities between the novel Dracula and the film Nosferatu became all too obvious. Florence Stoker sued the German studio into bankruptcy, and to gain more control over her late husband's work, Florence hired family friend Hamilton Dean to write a stage play for Dracula. It drastically cut down the story, yet became a huge hit, thanks to the performance of Hungarian actor Bela Lugosi on the New York stage. When Universal Studios chose to make a film adaptation of Dracula less than a decade later, Lugosi personally worked with Florence Stoker to prevent another copyright fiasco. Thanks to Lugosi's mesmerizing performance, Dracula has since become an icon, the subject of video games, comics, and 200 films and counting. That wraps things up for this episode of The Legendarium. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, press like. If you want to see more, press subscribe. And if you've got anything to say, let me know in the comments section. Thanks again for joining me, and I hope that you have a great rest of the day.